Crowder is the largest conservative YouTube channel. This is explicitly reframing history in order to promote the idea of a white ethno-state being politically necessary. Everything that he's saying right now is pro-white ethno-state language being framed behind a completely ahistorical, economics-based framing of the situation. Explicit racism framed through some kind of phony adjacent argument. Normally, Steven... Oh, I see. This is a Crowder Bits. The man has a second channel that I am, up until this moment, not aware of, but apparently here it is. Daryl makes BLM his bitch. F this S. What the heck is he doing? We've got Juggalos. I don't think the Juggalos would appreciate being invoked for a Steven Crowder Bit video. I don't think they would like that very much. And then we've got the Great Replacement Conspiracy come from the left? Whoa! Well, we better investigate this one, lads.
Not only our Muslim communities, but African communities, Asian communities, Hispanic communities, and the wave still continues.
He looks totally different.
It's not going to stop, nor should we want it to stop. An unrelenting stream of immigration. Non-stop.
What a fucking king. So right off the bat, I can already see the arguments. Crowder is going to pretend that the Great Replacement theory is saying that there are more immigrants into the United States, which of course there are. Nobody disagrees with that. You see this all the time with like the neo-Nazis who push the Great Replacement. They're like, everyone agrees with the Great Replacement. Look. And it's like, the thing everyone agrees on is that there are more non-white people in America. But the Great Replacement theory is that they're being deliberately brought in order to replace the native white inhabitants, and this is being done by the Jews in order to... It's the conspiracy. That's why it's called conspiracy. Because if it was just like the line of non-white people in America going up, that wouldn't be much of a conspiracy. The government is trying to hide the truth by burying the demographic information of the United States behind these obfuscating walls, such as publicly available census data that you can find on Wikipedia in 3 seconds, you know? They're trying to hide the truth. Though I should note, by the way, even if non-white immigrants are coming to the United States, and even if that does lead to a difference in the political outcomes in the United States, that's how democracy works. You know, they have to be naturalized as citizens before they can vote. It's not like they just step into the United States for 2 days, vote in the presidential, then leave. The immigration process and naturalization process takes like years and years and years and years, sometimes decades to get in. Why is conspiracy in quotes? Because Steven Crowder believes in the Great Replacement conspiracy. I've long felt that Steven Crowder is much farther right than he pretends to be. Or I should say, he says stuff that's covertly much farther right than he pretends to be, while personally being a grifter who doesn't care about any of this. Most of his arguments related to race issues are explicitly pro-racism. They don't do the Ben Shapiro thing where they're pro-racism by arguing through tangential issues like economic stuff, like racism and outcome. He seems to be pro-racism in intent, where a lot of his bits, segments, and arguments are literally just mocking black people for being black, or Hispanic people for being Hispanic, or Asian people for being Asian, or trans people for being trans. It's like an inherent thing for him, which, to be fair, is the position that a lot of conservatives, including Ben Shapiro, hold, but honestly, I'm surprised he hasn't been kicked off YouTube.
Stop. Folks like me who are Caucasian of European descent, for the first time in 2017, will be in an absolute minority in the United States of America. Absolute minority. Fewer than 50% of the people in America,
is that what
from
minority
then
means?
and on, will be...
Is that true? No, wait. We're still majority white. Was he counting non-Hispanic white? I think he's... Yeah, okay. I think he's lumping in Hispanic white with non-white here.
White European stock. That's not a bad thing.
Wow. Let's get to this, the Great Replacement theory. This is the talk everywhere, and everyone is afraid. The left has been very effective in making people afraid to even address it. Now, let me be really clear here. I am not saying that the...
Right off the bat, the classic conservative argument. Everyone is afraid to talk about this one thing that literally everyone is talking about following the Buffalo shooting. Everyone is petrified to discuss this in spite of the fact that it's being discussed widely all over the place on all major social media, and on major news sites, and on TV broadcasts, and by everyone everywhere. But we're brave enough, finally, to take him to task. Give him our take.
great replacement theory is a theory that needs to be espoused. What I am saying is that there has been a misrepresentation, of course, of shooters, how they've been influenced, and who is out there, right, preaching this idea of the great replacement theory. What they want to do now, people at CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, all of media, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, they want you to believe that it is mainstream Republicanism to tout a neo-Nazi slogan of great replacement theory.
True.
In order to silence you from discussing a very real issue of, I wouldn't even necessarily say race, I wouldn't even necessarily do the cop-out and just say culture, but voting.
Whoa. Did he just acknowledge that talking about culture is a dog whistle for talking about race? Wait, that was uncharacteristic honesty. Okay. Cool.
Demographics and the purchasing therein. So in case you haven't heard, let's just go here so you see what I'm talking about. Everyone from the left we have a montage, right? Them blaming Buffalo on the great replacement theory and racist conservatives.
Officials believe the gunman accused of the mass shooting in Buffalo was inspired by the white replacement conspiracy theory. Now, this is a baseless belief that white people are being slowly but intentionally replaced by minorities and immigrants.
The concept was once a fringe theory, but now it's embraced by many Republican lawmakers and Fox hosts.
For example, Fox News host Tucker Carlson. People count up this kind of stuff, so whether you watch him or not, the fact is that the people who do and who track this note that he has made a reference or variation to this type.
That's a good photo, by the way. I like this photo a lot. If I was in Tucker's position there, I would be proud to have that photo of me shown. It makes him look very intense, You can't handle the truth energy.
Type of hateful conspiracy theory, this replacement thing, over 400 times since 2016.
We also have, prominent talking heads, Tucker Carlson, Fox News, making hundreds of references, a study has shown, hundreds of references to this kind of great replacement theory.
Did you peer review that paper?
Of white genocide.
So when people like Tucker Carlson present a ready for...
I like how it's a casual joke with Crowder and crew, like, their disregard for empirical information is so severe that they have like pre-baked impulsive like quips to respond with when somebody says a study has shown,
Cable version of the theory. It makes more extreme versions of it more accessible to audiences who would have never encountered it or would have never really thought about it.
Hate that through the media and politics, the internet, has radicalized, angry, alienated, lost, and isolated individuals into falsely believing that they will be replaced. That's the word, replaced.
Okay.
Thanks, Biden, for addressing that in the most neutral tone imaginable. People are being radicalized by the internet to think they will be replaced. Thank you, Biden. You've really kicked at the heart of white supremacy, the creeping malignant tumor building inside this country. You've really taken him to task. Thank you. All right, Crowder, let's obfuscate. Go.
So let me be clear about something. They're trying to use the term the great replacement theory.
Let me be clear.
And the reason for that is that's basically an anti-Semitic sort of fringe theory that comes from people who believe that there's this cabal of Jews who are trying to replace white people. Okay. Of course, I don't believe that. And this is very important for me. I would like to see a comment below because I would like people to see the biggest, right-leaning YouTube channel that's ever existed. If you agree with the sentiment I'm about to express, I don't think that George Soros is sitting there, killing white babies. Okay. But what?
That's really funny. He's afraid that his audience would agree if he did say the actual, because he had to make it a joke right there, like personally killing white babies. But what if he said something like, yeah, I don't believe George Soros is deliberately pushing for policies that'll replace white people in the United States, in which case a good portion of his audience would agree. Isn't that funny? He realized midway through that he couldn't actually do, because it sounded like he was going to do something. Oh, sorry. It sounded like he was going to do something sincere with the biggest conservative channel. Let's all disavow this. But then he realized, wait, hold on. As soon as he said Soros, I think that was the thing that made him change his mind. Because if he just said Jews, his audience wouldn't agree. But if he said Soros, the billionaire Jew, then his audience would agree, at least a good portion of it. So I think he backed off there, and he had to do this whole oh yeah, George Soros isn't deliberately killing white babies personally with his own hands, You guys get what I'm talking about, right? I actually think he kind of tripped on that a little bit.
Is demographic changes due to large amounts of illegal immigration occurring unchecked and being made the beneficiaries of the social safety net, a current welfare system in this country, in order to ensure their votes. I'm not saying there's a planned orchestration of genocide.
Incorrect. Even Tucker Carlson lays the blame of demographic replacement at the Hart-Celler Act, the 1965 Immigration Act that ended the discriminatory immigration policies against non-white people around the world. Illegal immigrants can't vote. They can't vote. But yeah, the illegal immigration isn't really. Honestly, the Great Replacement types don't talk about illegal immigration that much, do they? Because the main thing they're talking about is immigrants coming in, non-white immigrants coming in to replace the founding stock of the country, and then biasing the votes in a way that benefit them rather than others. But illegal immigrants can't vote, so yeah. Also, yeah, U.S. known for its phenomenal welfare
against white people, but there absolutely is a plan in place that is taking place right now before your very eyes in allowing mass illegal immigration into this country in order to try and change voting demographics.
But illegal immigrants can't vote. They don't. I guess they're kids. Sure, they're guys, just 40 more years. Okay. Second gen, I guess. By second generation, though, like, you're dealing with naturalized born Americans. Like, at that, it's just Americans. Like, there's no way that's an issue unless it's a race thing. There's only two reasons you could take issue with that, because if you're born in America, you're an American. It's either a race thing or a class thing. Like, they're poor, therefore they'll vote for welfare, or they're non-white, therefore they'll vote for, I don't know, to legalize murder. Whatever they think non-white people like.
Now, I know you're going to say, hold on, and I want you to comment if you agree that that's what's happening, and I didn't have to mention race once, by the way, let's be really clear.
All the illegal immigration being done by Canadians. He literally already admitted culture is a dog whistle. Yeah, okay.
However, that exact sentiment has been expressed for years by the left, and they do make it a race thing. They call it the browning of America, and they brag about it.
In a few years, we're going to be a majority brown country. White people will not be the majority in the country anymore.
This will be the first generation.
But we note the difference between descriptive and prescriptive statements, noting the fact that this country is going to get less white with time, which is empirically demonstrable, is something anyone and everyone can do. It doesn't even suggest a political position. If they're bragging about it, that might mean they're in favor of immigration from countries all around the world. The majority of countries are non-white, of course. White people globally are a minority, as are any ethnic or racial group, because there are a lot of ethnic or racial groups. But that still doesn't necessarily indicate anything
Ever in American history in which whites will be a minority of the generation at some point.
As of 2007, every year babies being born in this country, whites now are the minority.
In 2044, everyone is going to be a minority.
As the demographics change, as white people become the minority in the country, which is coming.
Demographics is destiny.
Demographics is destiny.
Demographics is destiny, right? The country is changing.
I've been saying it here. Other people have been saying it here for years now, even before.
I want the context on this demographics is destiny thing. Usually when I hear that sentence said, it's from neo-Nazis who are saying that if you have non-white people in the country is destined to fail. I want to know the context in which they're saying this.
The country is changing.
I've been saying it here. Other people have been saying it here for years now, even before Donald Trump. The demographics is destiny.
The white population is declining for the first time in history in America, while the number of multiracial Americans have more than doubled.
So we live in a country where the demographics are changing. It's becoming less white.
Correct.
Okay, you'll be announcing that we're calling the 38 electoral votes of Texas for the Democratic nominee for president. It's changing. It's going to become a purple state and then a blue state because of the demographics, because of the population growth.
The growth in Texas has been almost entirely driven by non-white population growth, mostly by Hispanic and Latino population growth.
Demographics are destiny. So look, I think now it's fair. Hey, there's a huge difference between believing in the superiority of one's race versus acknowledging the changing of demographics. We have an overlay here. We have a reference. Let's go to overlay J really quickly.
So again, we're doing this exact same thing over again, which is everybody knows more and more non-white people are coming into the country. Nobody disagrees with that. That's not the conspiracy. This is just a very basic understanding of demographic trends. This isn't the conspiracy. The thing that radicalized the Buffalo shooter, the thing he was acting against, was the idea that this is being done deliberately to displace white people, and that it is a bad thing. And I believe he also thinks the Jews were doing it. But, you know, it's still the conspiracy if you don't believe in the Jews. It's just, for a lot of conservatives, they just kind of imply the Jewish thing, you know?
There you go. Those are the numbers. Those are the projections. Okay. And the left is bragging about it. Now,
they weren't bragging in those clips. They were just saying it. Wait, you provided like 20 clips. If they were bragging, why wouldn't you support that? Okay. There are people on the left who celebrate it because it's an end to the discriminatory immigration policies that we used to have. I think that's wonderful. But that's not the same as bragging. The Hart-Celler Act wasn't exactly passed by leftists. The provision of the Hart-Celler Act that led to the removal, or the provision of the Hart-Celler Act that led to the greatest increase in non-white immigration into the United States was done as a concession to conservatives. Wasn't it the bringing your family over thing? Changing the immigration law so that you could bring, like, your family over as well if you immigrate, and that, like, can be naturalized. You know what I mean? I'd have to look into it again. I did research on this back in, like, 2019 when I argued with Nazis more often. I'd have to refresh my memory.
I'm going to get to the history a little bit of immigration, how this changed dramatically, and why there's a difference when people say, well, we're a country of immigrants. Well, that's true. Immigration up through the 1960s, certainly the 30s, 40s, not at all the same as today.
I thought it was about illegal immigration, but wait, now we're getting to the Hart-Celler Act. Let's find out.
Here's the primary difference. You cannot have open borders, and you cannot have mass immigration when you have a social safety net and a welfare culture. It's very, very different.
Yeah.
Remember that the biggest immigration waves that ever took place in the United States relative to the proportion of the population we have, I believe it was Germans back in the 1800s. The waves of immigration that we got, like Germans in the 1800s, Italian, Irish, like Poles, all them together were colossal. They were massive. And they were also accused of draining the budgets of the cities, states, and the country they came into.
And that's where we are right now. When that happens, you've got to close the books, or at least have a guest book. There's a huge difference between legal and illegal immigration. The left tries to act as though we throw it all together.
So wait, why are we talking about illegal immigration when he just said up till the 1960s, which is when the Hart-Celler Act, which only affects legal immigration, was passed? It's like he wants to acknowledge this is a race thing, but then he's going back to the legality thing. Like, the thing that changed in the 60s was the race-based component of immigration laws into the United States.
Look, if you look at the Irish, the Italians, the Jews, these people in Europe who are fleeing wars, people will now say, oh, what happened to, Statue of Liberty? Give us, you're tired, you're hungry, you're poor. Yeah, at that point in time, there was no promise to feed the hungry, no promise to pay the poor from the taxpayer. That's a very different time. It was a very different reason for people migrating to this country, and it is not a scenario today that is tenable when you have people coming in and suckling at the public teat.
Then why is it that the time he said that immigration was different blocked off at the 1960s instead of when Social Security was introduced? That's interesting. If his concern is public spending, then why is it that the threshold that he set was not, in fact, when Social Security, which is by far the largest government like social spending expense today, was introduced, and rather, instead, back when the immigration law that changed the race of people that we could bring in was changed? That's interesting. Oh, and by the way, just because the welfare state as we currently understand it is more of a modern thing, does not mean that immigrants were not a fiscal burden to the areas that they arrived in back before the welfare state was a thing. Like, if you don't think waves of immigrants back in the 1800s were accused of draining the economy, then, well, you should go look that up, because they were every time. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and they looked at it as the land of opportunity.
Yes.
The way that they could go and work hard and make something for themselves, not a place to come and just get taken care of.
Yes.
That was the thing. It's
a totally real thing that happens. The very real problem of illegal immigrants entering the United States and just chilling and not working. That's something illegal immigrants are known for, not working. You can go to Los Angeles or like El Paso or San Diego and find lots of illegal immigrants just doing nothing. Obviously, they get all their welfare checks in spite of being illegal immigrants, somehow that happens. I don't know how. They don't have a social security number, but they take your jobs, but they also don't work. They're not citizens, but they benefit from welfare, it's crazy what they can do. These reality warping little munchkins.
A little bit different mentality.
Well, what happened is they were fleeing impending war, right? Throughout, obviously, I don't know if you're a history buff, but yeah.
Do you know
the early 20th century? No, there were two.
Several.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, they blew.
We turned away the Jews. Wait, the Jews that tried to flee Nazi Germany, we turned them away. They got sent back. They died. Despite making up less than 25% of the New York City population, Irish people made up 55% of those arrested in 1859. Curious. The U.S. government turned away thousands of Jewish refugees, fearing they were Nazi spies. The State Department and FDR claimed that Jewish immigrants could threaten national security. Yeah. Oh, this was back in 1942, so the Auschwitz was well underway by now. Didn't we turn away another wave? Oh, we turned away a lot. This was from 1939. Oh, how many boats of Jewish refugees did we refuse? Holy shit. More than 900 passengers at the MS St. Louis were denied entry by immigration in multiple countries to lead up to the Holocaust. For many on St. Louis, that rejection was a death sentence. Yeah, we did this a lot. Look, let's just continue with the video.
Blew their wad when they called the first one like the Great War. They had no idea what was coming.
Oh no,
the Greater.
Like this is the best war. Oh, that doesn't ring right.
Wait till you see 3. That's coming any minute.
So a lot of people were fleeing Europe, right? Because of these impending wars. They were constantly under the threat of tyranny. They wanted to be a part of America. They weren't coming here to get handouts. They were not coming here to this country to break the law. Not saying that everyone
55% arrests in New York City, Irish people. Again, keep in mind, everything that he's saying is different about these modern groups. People like him said about every previous group. They said this about Germans. They said this about Polish people. They said this about Italian people. They said this about Chinese people on the West Coast. They said this about Japanese people and then put them in internment camps. They said this about Poles. They said this about every single group. Every single time. There has never been an immigration wave to the United States that was not met with people accusing them of racial inferiority and leeching off the system. Every single time. And yes, the Italians and Irish were way more disposed towards criminality than fucking modern day illegal immigrants. Massively more so. Way more so. Far, far more so than modern day illegal immigrants.
right now who's coming to this country is breaking law, but a disproportionate amount of crime certainly committed on the southern border is by people who are here illegally. So they came here with no...
This is, I believe, not true in most cases and marginally true in some. Apart from the actual illegal border crossing, illegal immigrants are not criminally disposed. Why would they commit a crime? It leads to their deportation.
No promises on boats. Few bucks in their pocket. Today, half of all immigrant households receive at least one major welfare program.
Wow.
And
as opposed to 32% of households headed by the native born. Oh, what a tremendous difference right there. Also, one major welfare program? Like what? For what amount? If they don't have... Wait, 49% of households headed by all immigrants, naturalized citizens, legal residents, and illegal immigrants? Why would they group these in together? Wait, what? Why? All sources are available at louder in the description. Who? Wait, what group would ever do that? Oh, wow, no sources in the description. All sources available in the description. Really? Are they? No, they're not. Twitter, Facebook, shop, website, Instagram. Why would you say that if they're not there? You need to go to the website. I'm not going on the website. This is dumb. No sociological analysis of immigrants and their predisposition towards welfare consumption should ever look at naturalized citizens, legal residents, and illegal immigrants all in the same group. That is ridiculous. These are very, very, very different groups.
The left wants mass illegal immigration. Why? So they can guarantee a path to citizenship and they can get votes. Race has nothing to do with it. But here's the thing. At one point, race did have something to do with immigration policy. And I was going by rote this morning or last night when I was talking about this. I think a lot of you don't know that there was a proactive shift in immigration policy. You can thank Ted Kennedy here in this country because they wanted to favor big corporations and keep a permanent working class. Okay, so let me kind of give you a little...
That's how they're going to frame this. Non-white people coming in is worse because it means they can be paid lower wages, which is pro-corporate. So actually, it's anti-corporate for us to think only white people should come in. Is that how we're going to frame it?
Bit of a briefer. So after World War II, there were a lot of immigrants that were coming from Europe, and they were skilled. They were looking for good jobs. In other words, they weren't coming from countries that had not developed places. What do you mean? Honduras, El Salvador, Mexico, places that have not given anything else, and I mean this, anything else to the modern industrialized world. They were coming from places like Germany, like Poland, like parts of the UK.
Well, and very relatively similar cultures too.
Right. Relatively similar cultures.
But relatively similar.
And
didn't we just acknowledge that culture is a dog whistle for race? Dude! You just did that! Yeah, so white. So you mean white. So they're not non-white. Yeah, okay, we know. Thank you. Jesus. Yeah, by the way, the Hart-Celler Immigration Act that passed in 1965, it was not about like making it so that more unskilled people could come in. It was just about ending the discrimination against Southern and Eastern Europeans, Asians, non-Western, non-Northern European ethnic groups. That's it. Like, I mean, it did plenty of stuff, but it wasn't like, yeah, let's let everyone who's not a skilled worker in. It was just like, yeah, we can let non-white people in too, basically. There is no reason to oppose the Hart-Celler Act unless you have an issue with non-white immigration specifically. Crowder's literally making Charles Murray arguments. I mean, this guy on the right literally just said, and by the way, the people who used to come, they were white. Like, yeah.
They were looking for good jobs. Now, here's the thing. A lot of CEOs didn't like that because you're talking about bringing immigrants coming in who are skilled, and so they'll want to be paid more.
Yeah.
Right? So there was a bill, Ted Kennedy supported this bill that cut off immigration from what now known as the EU, opened it up wide to the Pacific Rim countries. Okay? It's called the Hart-Celler Immigration Act of 1965. And they claim it expands civil rights, as far as the movement to immigration and abolishing this national origins quota system. Really, what it did is it actually made it nearly impossible for European immigrants to come here with more skills, with more education, because they believed. And why favor people from the Pacific Rim? Because you're talking about people who would come from manufacturing jobs where they were making pennies, go to the United States, and guess what? They were less likely to ask for more.
So this right here is just explicitly and full on a lie. The Hart-Celler Act was about allowing people to come into the United States and ending the discriminatory policies against non-white people. That is it. Everything else that he says about it leading to more unskilled immigration or it being an attack on skilled immigration, this is simply a lie. It is just not true. It is incorrect. This is just literally just a way of selling a white ethno-state where you maintain discriminatory immigration policies through like pseudo-Nazwell bullshit. Crowder's dumbass said the third world / global south doesn't contribute to the developed world. Yeah, well, obviously. And it's not like Crowder gives a fuck about corporations exploiting workers anyway. Crowder will side with corporations on every single union argument, minimum wage argument, everything having to do with anything pertaining to workers' rights, he'll side with corporations. But then suddenly, my man Crowder, very skeptical of corporations when non-white people coming in may or may not lead to wage decreases, which, by the way, did they in 1965 and afterwards? No, actually, because immigration doesn't lower wages. It doesn't. Wages didn't fall. The principal argument of people like Crowder has been selling racism with the whole "they're taking your jobs" argument. But, empirical analysis has failed to provide those results time and time again. Immigration increases wages. Because when there are more immigrants, that means there are more people to demand services, and that means more business for businesses, which means they have to hire more people. The whole chain grows when immigrants come in. If Crowder lived in the 20s, he would hate on Germans, Italians, Irish, and Poles because the immigrants filled the unions and left-wing movements. Oh, and Jews. Crowder would hate the Jews, as he probably to an extent still does, but he would be probably quite a bit louder about it back then.
So this was the government saying, hey, CEOs, they want cheap labor. And right now, that's not necessarily, the Irish are coming in and opening up pubs. The Italians are coming in and, they're opening up restaurants and also organized crime. But I digress. They said, hey.
Oh, yeah. The Irish and the Italians totally came in wealthy and contributed. Are you fucking kidding me? Again, the only difference here for Irish and Italian people is that they're considered white. That's it. The Irish and the Italians were desperately poor and contributed to crime way disproportionately. Massively so. Yeah, dude, the wealthy Irish, the high-skilled Irish labor. Ridiculous. There wasn't, the skill requirement that he's saying was dismantled by the Hart-Celler Act wasn't there. They literally came, they lived in ghettos and tenements in New York City. This graph and narrative about Italian black people murdered in Philly is relevant. Hold on. Racial and ethnic trends in imprisonment for murder and voluntary manslaughter. Italians and blacks. Holy shit. And then all others. What the Italian graph measures is in the early years, the arrival of disproportionately male and single immigrants from a region with highest murder rates in Europe, their dispositions unimproved by the ocean voyage, their arsenals upgraded by American weapons. Within a short time, as these people found jobs in the still thriving urban industrial economy of Philadelphia, the graphic decline reflects the way in which they went to school, got married, and settled. Yeah, the big difference between Italian, Irish, and black people. So Irish and Italian people moved to the north when they came in immigration waves. Black people moved up north after slavery ended to work in the factories. And the big difference here is that all groups started out living in slums. They started out living in tenements. They started out very criminal, high rates of murder, beefed with the police constantly, very, very economically unproductive in the sense that they drained a lot from the economy, from the federal expenditure in terms of police expenditures or prisons, But the main difference there is that eventually Irish and Italian people came to be accepted as white. in large part because they reciprocated the racial bias that the majority white population had against black people. So by weaponizing their status of whiteness, they were able to be accepted and given roles and responsibilities that black people didn't. After all, black people were living under Jim Crow laws, Irish and Italian people weren't. So even then, Irish and Italian people, even though they started out with greater criminal elements than black people living in the same tenements, the same rundown portions of New York City or whatever, Irish and Italian people weren't being legally discriminated against, and the social discrimination against them lessened, which gave them an avenue towards what we now consider to be two relatively well-to-do middle-class white European populations in the United States. For black people, that was not the case, and so they remained the underclass, whereas Italians were able to fight their way into the upper class, or at least the middle class, the social middle class.
The Germans are coming in and they're becoming engineers. These CEOs don't want that. So let's change our immigration policy to make sure that we bring in as unskilled, dependent, and therefore grateful to the government.
This is factually incorrect in every possible way. This is simply incorrect. By the way, the funny thing is, what he's talking about right now is actually the opposite of the truth. You ever wonder why there are so many Nigerian doctors in the United States? Immigration is expensive. Poorer countries generally can't have like every random poor person in them fly over and become an immigrant to the US. Generally, poorer countries are only able to have their wealthiest and most educated people come over. So the poorer the country, the more disproportionately successful and educated those people are going to be. Whereas a poor family living in England or Germany is far more likely to be able to afford a move over than a poor family in like Nigeria. So what he's saying right now, it's not only incorrect, the opposite of what he's saying is true. This is a race-based argument. Remember what I said, folks, about needing to arm yourselves? Crowder is the largest conservative YouTube channel. This is explicitly reframing history in order to promote the idea of a white ethno-state being politically necessary. Everything that he's saying right now is pro-white ethno-state language being framed behind a completely ahistorical, economics-based framing of the situation. Funnily enough, something Shapiro would type do, explicit racism framed through, some kind of phony adjacent argument.
Government immigrants that we can. That was a decision that was made. You need to understand when you go, yeah, hold on. A lot of you inherently think there's a difference. You go, well, if I look at the Irish and the Italians, sure, we were a country of immigrants, but it feels like there was something different. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. This is basically like us today saying, hey, China
feels like something was different. Oh, guys, just trust your vibes in this one. Something just feels different when immigrants come from non-white countries, huh? It just feels a little bit different. I just don't worry about it.
Doesn't pay those kids that work in those factories very much. Can we get in on that action? Can we make it easier for them to come over here and just do that here?
Yeah. So what you're saying is like, okay, let's say America is a Buick.
Yes.
And Ted Kennedy, for example, would be a CEO.
Yes.
Okay, let's say it's driven into the water.
Yes.
Now the water is immigration, and it's filling the car.
And
now
what the fuck are you talking about?
Americans are Mary Jo.
That's exactly.
Okay, so now Mary Jo is just getting surrounded.
Yes.
But
and the Democratic Party waits a day.
Listen to the framing. Immigration is a threat that will drown the American people. This is not different from Nazi rhetoric. Ted Kennedy killed his girlfriend by abandoning her in a lake. Oh, is it a reference to that? Oh, gotcha. But still, like the way the language is being applied here is one which it inherently dehumanizes immigrants. It could be a little more like, they're playing up the joke, but like it's in line with everything else they've said.
And have to alert the authorities.
Correct.
Well, but here's what the Democratic
Which really isn't
Party
even allegorical. That's actually what
happened. Yeah.
Don't worry. I'm going for help.
So the CEOs are just showing up all wet to a party and going, I was here the whole time.
Yeah. Oh, hey, you're all wet behind the ear.
Good one. Good one. Where's Mary?
Yeah, I killed the bitch. By the way, that's pretty good.
Oh, that old chatterbox.
Yeah, just so you know, because I know you watching right now, you may be 20 years old, 18 years old. We have more people in that demographic than any other. You may not know. Ted Kennedy killed abroad.
Yes.
Jeez.
It's on record that he killed somebody. It actually happened.
He drove her drunk. Yeah, the Chappaquiddick Ripper.
Yes, and then left her and lied about it and didn't even call for help, and she could have been saved. So just in case you're wondering what's this reference, it's not like some esoteric Dennis Miller. It's something that everybody knows.
No consequences. Sorry.
Well, today I learned.
Last thing there, the guy that punched the guy got more consequences for that than that Kennedy got for killing somebody.
Well, it's why the brothers got assassinated, and they looked at Ted and were like, all right, I think he'll be taken out fine.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're not doing anything?
Right. Yeah. Like, well, we're only killing all the Kennedys who did sleep with Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
So
that was...
Okay, how long? Come on.
People who are coming from universities, coming from schools. We want to bring in people from sweatshops because that's what's best for the CEOs.
Yeah.
Yes, dude. When they opened up immigration for more of the world, Chinese sweatshop workers were the ones who were able to buy the... Yes, when you go over to the American West Coast and see all the Chinese people, it's totally sweatshop workers and not the children of Chinese millionaires who go over to UCLA to get their children the best education they can get. Having been to UCLA's campus, okay, you literally cannot, like, walk 10 feet without tripping over some Asian, like, foreign student or whatever whose parents are millionaires, who drives an incredibly fancy car, and whose streetwear drip is immaculate. Credit where credit's due. Don't know what it is. Oh, and they're all chain smokers. I don't know what it is about chain smoking and streetwear, but like UCLA Asian students who are the children of millionaires who come over from China, just insane drip. Like, they're drippy as hell. I have no idea why. Like, can I find a reference photo? Hold on. If I look up UCLA Asian foreign student, will they show a drippy student chain smoking? I feel like they kind of have to. No, they're not. They're just showing real people and not the crude stereotype that I'm manufacturing for the comedy. It's not a crude stereotype. It's real, okay? If you go to UCLA, you'll see. Okay, hold on. Rich Asian students, UCLA. Will that do it? I just want to see if I can get... No, I can't. It's all UCLA, like, prep photos where they show, like, actual students and not the crude stereotype. Okay, just go to UCLA. Don't worry about it. If you believe it, it's real to you. It's real, goddammit. I went to a SFSU, you're right. Goddamn, I am right. Yes, okay. Is Sturpy Asian student in the room with us, Vosh? Yeah, he's chain smoking. It smells like shit.
Yeah, and so, you know, this bolsters their voting base. Like, that's what Tucker Carlson was talking about. When CNN ran, like, hit pieces on Tucker Carlson right after the shooting, they ran him talking about illegal immigration, people coming in from the southern border. And so they're like, okay, well, how many? Nearly 1.5 million encounters thus far in fiscal 2022. I think it starts in October, so it's about halfway through the year.
Wait, encounters? You do realize encounter isn't the same as entry, right? That would be like me tracking every conversation I've had with everyone the whole year and then rate everyone as a new friend. Also, based.
Year, just a little bit over.
Yep.
And compare that to 646,000 encounters for all of fiscal 2020. An entire year. That was
1.5
yeah, and that's
to 800.
No, just it's
646.
646,000. That's encounters.
Isn't this because of a change in how the encounters were logged? A change from 646 to 2 million from 2020 to 2021, when we didn't have a proportional increase in illegal immigration during that time, suggests to me that the Biden administration is just like registering encounters differently. Hype beast fashion. Here we go. Oh, that's good. Is this person Asian? Susan Zhang? All right. This is what I'm talking about. This is the level of drip that I'm talking about. Like, you see so much of this shit. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Goddamn Naruto run. I really like this top, by the way, with the like Fs that are like alternating. That's a really nice top, I think. And drippy. No, it's good. It's good. Okay, let's not get too distracted here.
That's like almost 3 times.
Well, but
not exactly.
In 2020, Donald Trump's last year, that was the number.
Oh, can I just say, by the way, how nice it is to have 8,000 people watching, you know? I'm just glad you're all here. I love you all. I'm very appreciative of the job that I do. Like it, hit the like button. Hit it, get it to 5,000. What is it at right now? 4,000? Get it to 5. Be thankful that I'm not Crowder-esque in my shilling. Oh, speaking of, you know, at vosh.gg/merch, you too can be the proud owner of a beautiful t-shirt fashioned and sent by the White Forest Worker Cooperative. Thank you very much. And look at this sticker sheet. Oh my God. Okay, sorry. We're back on it.
Number, right? And they're not even done yet. The 1.5 million will likely be 2.5 to 3 million, somewhere in that neighborhood by the time that fiscal year ends. So the next thing is, the Biden administration so far in this fiscal year, which is about 6 months old at the time that they gave the stat, has released over 836,000 illegal immigrants into the United States. The catch and release. That is more than the Trump administration.
I don't trust his stats on this. They're probably not true. But even if they were, based.
Encountered at
and by the way, how many of them are getting formula? We don't have those numbers, but a lot.
Yeah, quite a bit.
All of them. Good. I don't believe people should just fucking die because they're not citizens. Yeah, he just wants them to die. Like, that's it, you know. In terms of, like, average moral accreditation, like how much I care about a person, I genuinely think your average illegal immigrant deserves more shit from America than your average American. There's nothing quite like the difference between some fat, hog-nosed, piece of shit, cop-loving, Blue Lives Matter, mobile, lawnmower-chewing, dipshit Republican suburbanite who, you know, claims to love America but hates everything it was founded for, when compared to, like, a you know, like an illegal immigrant who's scrappy and doesn't speak English, but worked hard to get here and is going to work for 1/2 the wage of the first guy, 1/4 the wage of the first guy, in order to support his family back home. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's in terms of who's more Christ-like, okay? Giving it to Juarez, giving it to Ernesto.
Part of it, but
shut your mouth. You think this is your country? What are you, a racist? But wait a second. I just want to buy formula. You're giving it to people who aren't even citizens. Shut your racist mouth.
Yeah. Well, the Supreme Court actually
yes.
Just heard a case where they basically wanted to get rid of the stay in Mexico policy, where Donald Trump said, look, if you're coming to this country illegally, the door is revolving. It goes right back into Mexico, and you can stay there. You can make your asylum claim there. You can get everything sorted out there. This administration changed that. They tried.
That's not how that works. You make asylum claims in the country that you're declaring asylum in. That is literally international law. You make them at a consulate in, you know, there are many potential stations that you can go to, but in the country that you're trying to get to. Yeah, also, that's not what a revolving door does. A revolving door doesn't mean that it turns you around 180 degrees. It means that the mechanism that moves the door is revolving. It doesn't mean you go out the other end. It doesn't like shoot you back like a U-bend in a pipe.
Tried to change it by executive order, and it got challenged. Right. So that case has been heard. Hopefully we'll get a ruling on that this summer. But they are absolutely for, oh, you're here in the United States illegally? Okay, we'll set a court date for you. Go have fun.
Right.
Do you think Crowder, like, yeah, he tries to get through revolving doors, and, like, he keeps getting befuddled by them because he doesn't realize, like, he thinks they turn you back around, so he just thinks that revolving doors is just some kind of wacky, like, you know, like set piece that you can install in the side of a building. So he's like walking around the airport trying to find an actual door that he can get in through, but they're all revolving doors, and he's like, you know, like, yeah, it's like a puzzle. Yeah, he's trying to figure it out. Wasn't it Donald Trump who did the revolving door analogy to begin with? Do you think Donald Trump's aides would have to blindfold him before like entering the airport? You know what I mean? To preserve, because he can't figure it out otherwise. Like they're just like, okay, push on the door and go forward. And he's got like the blindfold on. He's like, okay, all right, I'm through. And then they hurry him away before taking it off, you know? It was a talking point about prison systems in the 1980s. I am fully aware of the use of the term revolving door to describe places that allow people just in and out. However, the reason for that is because revolving doors aren't locked. Generally speaking, revolving doors don't have a latch and they don't lock unless the building is closed for the day. When you say that a prison has a revolving door, what you're saying is people go in and out all the time quickly, and that it's like it's not blocked in either direction, essentially, that it's a two-way entry. But you see, for the purpose of this joke, it was much funnier for me to pretend. Come on!
Right. And that's why Greg Abbott sent busloads up to Washington, D.C. and said, look, you're releasing them at our border. How about I bring them to your doorstep? Right. I'm not saying these are bad people. I'm just saying they're not doing it the right way.
Yeah.
Right. So that was the point they had. And they don't want a wall. They wanted to end Title 42, which basically was the COVID restriction.
No voter ID. Because
no
that's racist, even though 87% of black Americans want some kind of ID. But at that point,
who cares? I don't give a what black people want. I don't care what white people want. I don't care what black people want. I always say it's racist because I say so.
Americans are inconvenient, so shut your racist mouth. Hey, black Americans, you think you should have voter ID? What are you, racist? Well, I need ID.
Yeah, but
I love Crowder, man. He can't help it. He cannot help it. I love him.
You should have voter ID? What are you, racist? Well, I need ID.
Yeah, but guess what?
The fact that he didn't go massa is honestly like a credit to his restraint. You know, in his head, he had jokes about Hennessy. He had jokes about like Nikes. He was ready to go on like a 40-second like tirade in response to that one, and he just kept it to that. And honestly, I think that's good. Actually, what do people not like about voter ID? So first of all, voter fraud is not an issue in the United States. We've done many studies on voter fraud, and it literally is just a non-problem. It's just not a thing that happens in any significant sense. It's not only insignificant. It's like it's not even marginal. It's like I'm trying to think of a word that's above nothing but below every descriptor for something that's minimal. It's anti-significant. It's nothing, you know. It just doesn't really happen. Keep in mind the 2020 presidential election was like the most scrutinized election in all of American history by a huge factor. And yeah, there were like 3 cases of individual voter fraud done, or whatever. Like there were a few, because there were always a few in a country of hundreds of millions, and like they were mostly Republicans. So okay, and a lot of it is just people being dumb, like they just misfile because they're stupid. You know, it's not the idea of it being like a political thing. Yeah. But anyway, the problem with voter ID, so first of all, it's not needed at all. But also, the United States does not have a universal ID. The government does not guarantee you for free an ID, which means that there are going to be people who don't have an ID. Most people have an ID. The vast majority of people have an ID, but some people don't. A small number, but small extrapolated to a country of hundreds of millions are, that's a lot of people. And generally speaking, the people least likely to have IDs are racial minorities and poor people, who tend to be racial minorities. So we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people here who would be inconvenienced. Keep in mind, oftentimes getting an ID of any sort requires time or money. Oftentimes people who are really poor or underinformed or undereducated, they don't know about a new ID law, so they'll show up to vote, not have an ID, and then their vote won't get counted because they won't be able to enter or apply one. You'll have issues where people get taken off. This is a real thing, by the way. Hundreds of thousands of Black Americans taken off voter registries without their knowledge before the election, so then their votes just don't count. State ID laws changing, stuff that can be easily and quickly amended if you have time and money, but less so if you don't. Like, guys, if voter ID was required for voting, this would affect me zero. Even if it weren't for the fact that I already have voter ID, and I do, I would just be like, oh, I'll just drive out and get one. No distance would be a problem to me. No cost would be a problem to me. Even if it was just $50. But $50 is like a week worth of groceries for one person. For a poor person, that could potentially be enough to deter them. Maybe they could afford it if they saved up, but think about it. If you're really, really poor and you live in a shit area and you don't have a driver's license or whatever else, and it's like $30 to get the ID that you would need to vote, or you can get enough food to make it through the week, what do you think you're going to choose? Why isn't it free? Because it's America. In a country where voter fraud is not a problem, the necessity of a voter ID is an unnecessary, classist, and racist policy. It doesn't solve anything. The reason Republicans push for it is because they know it would disproportionately discriminate against people, which brings to mind the North Carolina shenanigans that got overturned recently, thanks, where the state Republicans crafted a voter ID law after specifically requesting what types of voter ID were most used by Black people, and then requiring voter IDs that weren't those ones, deliberately trying to essentially cut off statistically portions of the population that they knew would vote mostly for Dems. And then the state court, I think, or the Supreme Court said that it was targeted against Black people with surgical precision, but then another court overturned that ruling, so maybe they've already put that back in place. I don't even know. The point is, the voter ID thing is just another way of implementing a voter control. It's just not necessary. It's just not. Just taint.
But they're actually hedging their bets because they think voter ID...
Was it South Carolina? South Carolina, not North Carolina. Thank you.
...is racist, and they say you shouldn't have to have it to vote in this country, but they're also saying that everyone should get an ID just in case.
Just in case.
I wonder why they're saying
because certain states are having ID laws. That's why.
Interesting.
And so they need to ensure that they can get votes. Again,
are these blue states?
Who knows?
Wait, what? Wait, how is that a hypocrisy? There shouldn't be voter ID laws, but even so, you should get an ID just in case there are? Wait, how is that even remotely hypocritical? That's a perfectly consistent position. Okay.
Weird. Mostly Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. I can't think. Michigan, maybe something like that.
I don't know.
And let me end this. Look, it's about voting demographics. Just to be clear, I don't believe that people use interchangeably that race is destiny. Now, I also, by the way, this is something people won't like to hear.
Hey, it was North Carolina. Who corrected me? The law was motivated at least in part by an unconstitutional intent to target African American voters in their 100-page majority opinion. Yeah, I think this got overturned. Is the surgical precision quote here, or is that listed elsewise? The plaintiff's case emphasized analysis from a University of Michigan professor who said Black voters are 39% more likely to lack a qualifying photo ID than white registered voters. So, yeah, like this right here, you know? Like, conservatives will do this like, it's so easy to get an ID. It doesn't matter how easy it is. If there's no reason to have a voter ID law, which there isn't, then the effects of a voter ID law would be plainly discriminatory.
I also don't think there's anything wrong with white Americans wanting their neighborhood to look similar to how it looked with their dad.
Okay, let me back this up a second. All right, let's get our hands dirty, huh? All right.
maybe this is something people won't like to hear. I also don't think there's anything wrong with white Americans wanting their neighborhood to look similar to how it looked with their dad and their grandparents. And, you know, people tend to be comfortable around people they were raised with. Have you been to Mexican neighborhoods? Been to largely black neighborhoods? This is a natural process that takes place. Doesn't mean that you should seclude yourself, but I don't blame black people for watching black entertainment television. I don't blame.
So again, literally, this is indistinguishable from the arguments that I heard from Stryker, the Nazi, that different racial groups naturally segregate themselves because people naturally want to be along their own kind, and there's nothing wrong with wanting your neighborhood to look the same. This is, again, full-on neo-Nazi talking points are mainstream Republican values now, okay? We're up against the clock, folks. This is a mainstream conservative position now. You can't have this being iterated by Crowder without it being one. Dude's got millions of subs. He's clearly representative of some significant portion of mainstream Republicanism. Yeah, and Crowder's the title here is that the left is the one that came up with this conspiracy theory. Well, he's like, I think people of different race should stick to their own kind, you know?
Latino people for watching Telemundo. I understand that we have different tastes because...
By the way, black people aren't all in black neighborhoods because they want to be there. They're in black neighborhoods because they got redlined, and the policies under that redlining haven't been meaningfully redressed since Jim Crow ended. Very bold to blame black people for forming enclaves when they were legally prohibited from leaving them. You know, that's like blaming Jews for being kept in Polish ghettos in the 30s.
Because we have different cultures. Melanin doesn't determine how you vote. Unfortunately, it's about buying votes from the Democratic Party. Like you said, they realized they weren't going to be able to buy the votes of, for example, Italian Americans who came here and started businesses and were paying taxes. They realized
again, this complete ahistorical myth that Italians just came over to America and started businesses and paid taxes as though they weren't the most disruptive and criminal group in the North for a really long time. Remember earlier, yeah, when he mentioned the mafia and he was like, oh yeah, anyway? Remember that earlier? When he was like, oh, well, they did the mafia. But anyway, like, because, guys, he only likes them because they're white. That's it. That's the only difference. He's essentially admitted it here. He said earlier that culture was just a dog whistle for race, and now he's talking about different cultures.
This back then, so they said, let's bring in a bunch of people who are basically indentured servants from these countries. So they'll be grateful to us, and they'll vote for us. Well,
that just didn't happen. It has not happened.
Now you see that changing a little bit, right, with those same Asian Americans back then. You're no longer convenient for them. And you're starting to lean a little more right. So let's now bring in more people from Mexico. Let's make sure that our policy favors people coming from these countries that they, hey, look, you remember who helped you, right? You remember who brought you in? You remember who, even during a pandemic, we paused is it Title 42? We paused Title 40, right? Remember we gave you formula?
So you might notice what Crowder right now is attributing to a conspiracy is the idea of the Democratic Party doing things that are good for a group of people, and then that group of people will vote for him. You realize right now that he is literally chiding the Democrats for being better for immigrants than Republicans. Like, this is democracy. It's called policy. Wow, the Democrats are buying votes by using their power to better the lives of people in America. You realize that's literally what he's saying right now. He's just talking about what politics is. But he's framing it like it's some racial, underhanded conspiracy.
Remember how to vote. Because on the issues, they can't. When you look at the issues of abortion, you look at the issues of even taxes, you look at the issues of what's taking place in schools.
Yeah, the issues that Republicans are so big on, like critical race theory and purple-haired teachers in elementary school.
Brown Americans, meaning all Latino Americans, and even Muslim Americans, I'm including them among brown Americans and black Americans, overwhelmingly would align with a center-right point of view.
And yet all of them vote disproportionately Democrat. And that will remain the case, at least to a significant point, as long as mainstream Republicans like Steven Crowder are making white nationalist arguments in their videos, which is all this video right here is.
So they try to make it about things that they give you, so they can purchase your vote. And then as we see today.
Like this is literally how democracy functions. Yeah, dude, FDR got 4 consecutive presidential wins, more than any other president in American history, because he bought people's vote. Yeah, he did. Yes, he did establish the basic tenets of the welfare state and make people's lives better and carry us out of the Great Depression and improve our economy and lead us through the war. Yeah, that is true. By doing things that people liked, they voted for him. It's an astonishing concept to Republicans who buy people's votes instead by lying about minority groups to make them fearful. The idea, to a Republican, improving the life of a voter is like a heretical, you know. It's not, it doesn't even come up in their heads, you know, making people's lives better. That's not the Republican way. So he doesn't recognize it in Democrats.
They only use you when it's convenient. So look, it's not, I want to be really clear about this. It's not about race, but it's not just about culture, because people say it's not just race, it's culture. There's a part of that for sure. We all have different cultures. But let me present something to you, okay? This is something with white supremacists that really bothers me. To the actual white supremacists, and there are very few, like to the 4 of you.
Yes, to the 4 of you. By the way, this was done right after the Buffalo shooting. Right after the Buffalo shooting, 10 people, innocent people killed in a grocery mart. Right after the Buffalo shooting, we're doing this.
Look,
the boots?
Yeah, there are 50% of white people. Actually,
the 4. Oh, sorry, yeah. He's addressing the 4 people in the room with him. The 4 of them, point. You know, we've got the 2 guys in the side room. You know, we've got like the camera guy. We got, the 4 of them here.
Probably more in our country, who share your same culture, and they vote Democrat. And by the way, right now, think about it, and I understand demographics will change, and so you're concerned about that. However, let's assume those demographics change. The demographics are already bad enough when you take people from your own race and from your own culture. You can't say that it was black people. You can't say that it was brown people who screwed you with Barack Obama. It was white people with Bill Clinton, with Jimmy Carter. So I just want to make sure people are going to come and say, oh, it's a cop-out. I'm not saying that there aren't differences inherently between races. I'm not saying that there aren't differences culturally that often have to do with differences inherently between races. I'm not saying that there aren't differences culturally that often have to do with how people are that are racially based. I'm not saying any of that, but what I am saying is the primary issue is not that, and that's not how I'm not saying that there aren't differences culturally that often. So I just want to make sure people are going to come and say, oh, it's a cop-out. I'm not saying that there aren't differences inherently between races. I'm not saying that there aren't.
Yeah, I don't think Steven Crowder's point that in addition to non-white people voting against white supremacist interests, there are also white race traitors is really going to do much to prevent white supremacy. He's essentially saying, hey guys, don't forget, it's not just the non-white people. You know, I'm not saying that we're not all different or that there aren't inherent differences between races. He literally just said that verbatim. But there are also white race traitors. So keep that in mind, you know.
Differences culturally that often have to do with how people are that are racially based. I'm not saying any of that, but what I am saying is the primary issue is not that, and that's not how the Democrats are thinking of it. They're thinking of whose votes can we buy. And why don't you talk about half of this country whose votes have been bought? I would take 10 brown people.
Remember when Donald Trump actually held back on the COVID relief checks, the $1,200, because he wanted his signature to be on every single one of them, literally buying people's votes right towards the beginning of the pandemic in a more explicit fashion than like basically ever before in all of American history? You remember that? I remember that.
Who look and act differently from me for every white person who shares my race and culture and is voting to take my rights away.
What rights?
I'm going to have 10 Latino American, assuming, by the way, let's be clear, all legal immigrants versus one Swedish immigrant who comes in and wants a social safety net system and, by the way, now has lost his bragging rights of being neutral as his shitty country tries to join NATO. How about this? Once you pay up the back bill, pay your tab and you can get in.
What? Okay.
The problem is that we have right now a system of immigration laws and it starts these people. And by these people, right now, I mean, yeah, primarily brown people. I mean, yeah, primarily people coming from South America by design, just because geographically it's easiest for them to come in illegally. And
is that by design? Wait, by design means that it has to be designed. I don't think liberal Democrats designed the 3,000-mile border between America and Mexico. You know, I don't really think they planned for that one. Designed by God? Yeah, sorry God hates you and puts you in the company of Mexicans. Move up to Maine or something, where there aren't as many of them. What state has the fewest Mexicans? What do you think? It's got to be Maine, right? Furthest north? Something like that. Probably has fewer, you know. Wyoming? What Mexican would want to move to Wyoming? Alaska? Oh! Alaska! It's got to be Alaska. The Dems split Pangea. Epic liberal trolling moment when Joe Biden time warped back to Pangea and karate chopped the ground so hard, making sure that there's, you know, the Latin American split doesn't happen. Joe Biden loves uniting the Americas so badly that if his arms were long enough, he would personally pull the Panama Canal shut.
It's in the Democratic Party's best interest for the immigrants to be illegal. Think about that for a second. That by itself, it's in the best interest of the Republican Party and of the American people for immigrants to be coming here legally. It is absolutely, unequivocally, in the best interest of the Democratic Party for them to enter illegally.
So notice how he's saying this here, in spite of the fact that he was impugning the changes made to legal immigration policy from the 1965 Hart-Celler Act. Illegal immigrants can't vote, Crowder. So here, let's just finish this so I can finish my thoughts.
That's why their policy reflects it.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so I want to be really clear about something. A couple of things. First of all, I don't think there's much of a meaningful difference between the position that Crowder has in this issue and the position that most neo-Nazis have. There was something that I saw recently during some drama surrounding Nick Fuentes that I thought was, funnily enough, like a reaffirmation of my positions here. So, with the drama with Nick Fuentes being unveiled to be a cum-boy, a little cum-loving cum-boy cat boy, you know, there were some other Nazis who were talking about Fuentes and the drama within Fuentes, and they said something that I think is actually really, really, like, important for us to internalize. And that thing is that, do you guys remember the war between Fuentes and Turning Point USA? Remember back in like 2019 where some groypers showed up at a TPUSA conference and harassed like the black gay guy up there? How does anal sex win the culture war? Like that type of thing. Remember that? Well, the other Nazis, the non-Fuentes Nazis, were talking about why Nick Fuentes went from being like kind of an optics guy to just screaming about how he loves Hitler and hates Jews. And what they said was, you know, Charlie moved right. Now that there's not really any real difference between Charlie Kirk and Nick Fuentes' positions anymore, Fuentes has to distinguish himself by going full-on anti-optics, woo-woo Hitler bullshit, you know? Essentially, these Nazis, full-on Nazis, admitted self-appointed Nazis, were saying, yeah, he had to distinguish himself because there's not really a political difference between Nick Fuentes, Charlie Kirk anymore. And that's true. Charlie Kirk is a supporter of basically every single position that the alt-right identified itself by, just with a very thin veil of dog whistles. You can go look at his Twitter. It's basically not any different from how alt-righters talked back in like 2019, 2020. He leads Turning Point USA, which is a very powerful subsidiary group underneath the Republican Party. This is the place that we're in right now. Nazi talking points are mainstream conservative talking points now. That's where we're in. We've got two political parties. We have milquetoast liberalism, centrism with some progressives in there, and then we've got a Republican base of anything ranging from neocons to neo-Nazis supporting politicians whose political positions are closer to the neo-Nazis than the neocons. That's where we're at right now. You understand? So if anybody believes that my rhetoric has been alarmist in the recent past, then I would encourage you to pay a little more attention to the direction things are heading. Unless you think it's normal for a political party to, over the course of perhaps 6 years, go from being reminiscent of George Bush-era neoconservatism to full-tilt white genocide, great replacement, proto-genocidal rhetoric. If you think that's normal. Republicans have never really rebuked Nazis all that harshly, Vosh. That's true, they haven't. But it's important to understand the path to power that the far-right elements of the Republican Party have always sought out. People like, who's that Klan guy? Duke something, Lee something. What am I thinking? How am I blanking on this name? David Duke. Thank you. You know, he has been in the past quite prominent in the Republican Party. Even as not a fully endorsed member, he's still got plenty of votes for his, gubernatorial run? Far too many. But it's important to understand, political power is like, it's like electricity. It moves through the path of least resistance. See, back in the 1950s, there were a lot of Nazis. Anyway, it's the path of least resistance. You know, back in the 1930s, the Nazis actually held quite a bit of sympathy in the United States. After all, many Nazi policies were based on or inspired by things that we had done. American eugenesis, the American genocide of the Native Americans. You know, the Nazis admired much of what we had done, and Americans admired them right back. And there were American Nazi rallies that tried to tie Nazi Aryan ideology to the founding of America, to George Washington. Not so much to Abraham Lincoln, for reasons you can probably imagine, given their ideology. They weren't as fond of that man back in those days. But whatever the case may be, you know, they enjoyed a decent amount of support here, you know. And then, of course, the war started. And when the war started, you know, Nazi invaded American allies. It became, you know, very politically inadvisable to be an open Nazi. So covert Nazis, they remained. And at first they were split between Dems and Republicans in different ways, because back then Dems and Republicans hadn't completed their party switch, and there was like the Southern Democrats that hadn't moved over because of the Southern strategy. But, you know, it was more complicated back then. But we'll just say these crypto Nazis, I ask you, how do they push for the policies they care for? Well, back in those days, you could be a politician and just call black people the N-word. You could openly advocate for keeping white and black people separately, keeping them separate, and not only be politically effective, that could be a popular position, an uncontroversial one in some areas even. In an environment like that, the Nazis in America, the people who either were Nazis or very sympathetic to Nazi ideology, they didn't have to work very hard to get their ideology pushed. The segregationists back then could work through mainstream channels. Today they can't. Since the Hart-Celler Act, the meteoric increase of non-white people in America, and the shifting of political and progressive positions, we are now further and further from the Nazi dream than America ever has been. So the path of least resistance has changed. Before, electoralism was an effective mechanism for pushing racial segregationist ideology. Hell, until 1965, it was on the books in immigration law that you could discriminate against non-white people. Of course, they said it was, you know, Asia, East and Southern Europe, Latin America, but everyone knew it was a race thing, and they treated it like a race thing. They didn't lie about it for the most part. It was pretty forthcomingly. The Chinese Exclusion Act, right, tell me it's not a race thing, of course. You know, in an environment like that, you can be far, far right and feel like you're progressing towards something within the system. But that's not really open and available these days. With America as it is right now, as long as our democracy functions, these laws will not pass. The Republican agendas will not pass. This white supremacist, white nationalist banning of this immigration, this, that, or the other. This won't happen. And maybe the Republicans get a lucky sweep one election year, come 2022-24. Whatever they do is going to be undone the next sweep, you know? So the far right understands. The path of least resistance to their political positions is no longer electoralism. It's direct action. Or a combination of both. The subversion of democracy after a few lucky wins and a whole bunch of gerrymandering could allow them to cement power in a way that they couldn't maintain simply through consistent elections. That's the difference here. See, Nazis haven't grown more common. They're not more prominent than they used to be. The alt-right isn't some new thing. The ideological tendencies that led to this point, the hatred of Jewish people, of non-white people, the hatred of gender non-conforming individuals, the belief that homosexuality is degenerate, all these things, they're not new. They've been around and prominent in America for a long time. All you have to do is go back a couple decades and you can find these positions being espoused more openly and more frequently than anything you see today, even with the existence of the alt-right. And yet, an opportunity has presented itself. And that's what I'm worried about. Even if the American people are majority on board with basic progressive positions, or at the very least not on board with a full-on fascist takeover of the government, I don't think the American people have to be on board with the end to a democracy. That's what the end to democracy means, that the people don't have to be on board with it. You understand what I'm getting at? I don't want you all to think of what's happening right now as a resurgence of some old ideology or even the creation of a new one. It's the same ideology, which has taken different forms over the past century, finding now a path of least resistance, which before wasn't open to it. A weakened democratic institution and a party base radicalized to accept the results of a anti-democratic takeover. So essentially, it's just a consistent stream of the same fucking thing, just adapting to the current circumstances like a virus. Yes, like a virus. And it has to be stamped out like a virus. We can't keep dealing with this, folks. The world's a dangerous place. We've no room for anti-democracy and fascism. We can't do it. Now, the best way to get rid of this, properly get rid of this, is reconstruction. That's what we need. You know, Reconstruction, back when it was taking place, was pretty based. See, the Civil War, and I really want you to appreciate how absurd the Civil War was. I mean, we are a growing, industrious country, and then because the South is fearful of slavery being taken from them, something which has been on the table, by the way, since the founding of the country. You know, even back after the country was founded, they signed in that compromise, which denied them the ability to legislate against slavery until 1800. It's always been on the table. The idea that slavery would last forever was not a commonly held position. Even people in the South, back in the formation of the country, not entirely, but for the most part, I think, were at the very least open to the discussion of the abolition of slavery, you know, as a future political abstract, as long as it didn't cut into their books, maybe their grandchildren's books. But at the very least, it was something to talk about. But as the people in the South grew more acclimated to their racial superiority over black people, the role of being the master instead of the slave, they adopted it culturally. It became ingrained and thus more accepted. And we proved wrong the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers believed that slavery would fade away as America grew more developed and civilized. But the opposite was the true. The slavers grew more entrenched in their political positions because they became culturally adapted to it. The opposite was the truth. The Founding Fathers were wrong. And then the South up and seceded. And all these Confederate states had their own, you know, state constitutions, and a bunch of them were like, this state is enshrined in the eternal belief of the superiority over the white man, over those lesser kin, and God gave him this land, blah-de-blah. You know, you can read them. They're poorly written. Dumb larpy. I guess I can't say it's larpy, you know. And then we had a war. A war the South started by firing on Fort Sumter. In spite of the fact that the North had better productive capabilities, they were willing to secede and then start the war to preserve slavery. And then we killed them. Oh boy, Burnham Sherman marched on south and waged war like them fucks were not ready for. Oh boy, I left a trail you could see from space. Burnham Sherman making his way down like a goddamn meteorite. And it was good. And they deserved it. And they lost. What were the losses? Up until COVID, the Civil War was the most ruinous event in terms of human lives in all of American history. Hundreds of thousands of people on both sides. Sherman responsible for a good number. Effective, he was. Anyway, the South lost. And what do you do after you catch the South being a bunch of naughty boys, but give them a spanking? We spanked them with Reconstruction. But there was a problem. You see, Lincoln, being the liberal that he was, he had the bright idea of getting himself a vice president who was sympathetic to the South. He thought it would be a good way of earning favor, demonstrating bipartisanship. So what do you think happened when Lincoln got shot? Well, the vice president became the president, and then Reconstruction ended. But Reconstruction was based, very based. And we failed to denazify. That's not quite true. I am simplifying like crazy. The point is, Hayes ended Reconstruction. The point is that there was not a strong and consistent line to maintain the Reconstruction. Wasn't it someone else left then? Someone else got shot? I could be misattributing it. Was it another vice president who was sympathetic to the South who took the presidency after the shooting? Was there another president who got shot? It was Johnson. Johnson did? All right, well, we'll chalk this one up to me having no understanding of history whatsoever. Take Chat's word in it. Ignore everything I said about who exactly was responsible. But Lincoln was a liberal. You can hate him for that. So, listen up. Here's the important part, okay? Reconstruction was, let's say, spicy, okay? It was martial law down in the South. The Union deployed tens of thousands of troops to hold down the fort, you know, to hold down the South. And the purpose of this is You see, any group of people who were willing to do what the Confederate leadership did, they got to be purged, folks. I'm sorry. You can't go doing that twice. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. If Reconstruction had been done properly, there would have been gallows stretching the length of the trail that Sherman marched south through with Confederate sympathizers hanging from them. There would have been more deaths following Reconstruction than there would have been from the fucking war. It's not like there wasn't plenty to punish people for. They were slavers, after all. There's a reason for doing this, and don't get me wrong, it's not all punishment. None of it really is about punishment. The real purpose of this attitude is to prevent the formation of secessionary sentiment in the future. I'm pretty hardline anti-death penalty. I'm talking it up a little bit, they were pro-death penalty back then. We're talking about what they did back then, not what we would do now. But, I'll cut the euphemisms and just talk about what I want now. The Republican Party has to be disbanded. Being anti-democratic forfeits your position in a democratic republic. You don't get to be that. I'm sorry, that's a disqualifier. Red card. You don't get to. I'm sorry. And people are going to say that's anti-democratic. Well, you know what? That's your fucking fault then, for having an anti-democratic Republican Party. I'm very sorry, It's like complaining about, you got two teams in a soccer match, one of which is playing fair, and then the other one is cheating like mad. And then they get red carded, they get disqualified, the other team wins by default, and then you say it's not a fair match because the other team won without really winning. Well, that's your fucking fault, isn't it? Who stuffed the wrench into their soccer shorts to bean the other person over the head? You did! You voted for them. You backed it. The Republican Party cannot be allowed to continue in its present state. And I don't just mean federally, I mean the whole party. And then come the sedition trials. And you think, by the way, oh, what an authoritarian crackdown. No, full due process. If people go free, they go free. That's a guarantee that American citizens ought have, and we will continue to have so long as Republicans aren't in power, Full-on due process. Now, when I talk about sedition here, how many folks, I want a ballpark estimate from you guys. If we were to try everyone for sedition, every American, let's just magically, like all of them magically in an instant go through with a trial. How many of them do you think could reasonably be said to have either directly participated in or enabled or backed an attempt on the government, its institutions, its legislators, or its ability to pass laws? Now, by my reckoning, and this is a totally arbitrary threshold here, by my reckoning, you could find a good lot of fucking people. But if we're talking specifically about the Republican Party's attempt on the January 6th coup, their effort to destabilize the election, the great lie about ballot counting and mail-in voters and blah-de-blah-de-blah, I genuinely think that you could legitimately, in a full, fair, trial given to due process, you could probably find tens of thousands of Republicans, easily tens of thousands, who were making a genuine effort to participate in the deconstruction of our democracy. Something like that. And I think they should be tried. And I think they should go to jail. Because how resilient can our democracy possibly be if we allow this to continue? What happened after January 6th? Nothing. The Congress people weren't punished. Gassar, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the calls that we heard, the Clarence Thomas, his wife, him not recusing himself from a case pertaining to the release of information that she participated in the coup. All of this, there was nothing happened. The feds, they went after the dipshit, foaming at the mouth fascists who actually broke into the Capitol building. Bonk him over the head and put him in a bar somewhere. I don't give a shit if militia member number 1482 gets free after storming the Capitol. You know why? Because more of them are going to come as long as people like the radicals in government who supported and backed them, who promised them support if they should fail, those people, as long as they're continuing to speak, there's just going to be more of these militia dipshits. I hope you all understand what I'm saying and sympathize with it. None of this has to do with a takeover. If I was suggesting a takeover, I would be talking about some kind of leftist coup. But I'm fully aware that if what I talk about takes place, all we're going to get is a, larger Democrat Party, a much larger independent base, and Democrats pushing milquetoast liberalism uncontested for maybe 1 or 2 election cycles before independents create a new, prominent party, or one emerges from the existing ones. I'm fully aware of the fact that I would still hate the society that I live in if all this was to take place, but at least it would remain a fucking democracy. At least it would remain the institution socialists are most capable of working within. Because if you think radical socialism will be tolerated within a fascist oligarchy, then good luck with that. Good luck. We'll have a chance of moving forward. Have you mentioned Donald Trump endorsing a call for a second civil war? Give me a screenshot. I've seen it, but just give me a screenshot so I can show. That's all I'm talking about. This isn't a coup de power. This is just keeping your house in order, which is exactly what Lincoln had to do as well. Said he had to do. This is why we need ranked choice as a spearhead? No. People don't care about ranked choice. The average American doesn't know what ranked choice is. It's important, but it can't be a spearhead. Spearheads have to be sharp. You're sharp when you're fear-mongering. I don't like that term because everything that I'm saying to you right now is, to the best of my knowledge, a fully reasonable assessment of the world that we live in. I don't believe I'm manufacturing anything. The term fear-mongering suggests to many the idea of you're manufacturing something, you're constructing ghosts, but I don't think I am. But people need to be afraid. They ought to be afraid. People should have been afraid in Ukraine prior to the invasion of Russia. People should have been afraid in Poland prior to the invasion of Germany. Weimar Republic Germans should have been afraid prior to the takeover of the Nazi Party, the appointment by Hindenburg. Fear is a rational response to incoming threats. Just a former president sharing a social media post advocating or predicting civil war in the U.S., retweeted by Donald Trump. From the president of El Salvador, the most powerful country in the world is falling so fast it makes you rethink what are the real reasons. Something so big and powerful can't be destroyed so quickly unless the enemy comes from within. Civil war from MAGA King Thanos. Great, phenomenal, wonderful. Great. Very soy, very Marvel. The likelihood of a fascist coup succeeding is still 15%, quite low. Oh, just 15% of the democracy of the world's strongest country failing. Well, I'm feeling better already. It's not about the coup. It's not about a retruth, not retweeted, sorry. It's not about a coup. A coup isn't what's necessary here. If the Republicans win in every branch of government, they won't need a coup. They'll just sign off on all their own bullshit. They would be able to do everything except for change the Constitution, because that requires state verification. But if they want to pass a bunch of laws that restrict voting, they have the Supreme Court. And you realize you don't really have to change the Constitution. If you own the Supreme Court, all you really have to do is have them interpret the Constitution in ways favorable to you. If they can overturn Roe v. Wade, you think they can't overturn Brown versus Board of Education? You think they can't? Oh, well, an originalist interpretation of the Constitution has given us the understanding that this was actually very, very poor. You think they can't? You think they wouldn't? Why wouldn't they? And if they're able to do that, and the legislature is able to pass what they want, the president's able to sign off on what they want, every executive order they can pass, every federal law they can pass, every constitutional interpretation they can pass, they don't need a coup. That's it. That's all you need. There isn't some invisible force field they have to push through once they're at that point. They could fully legally, fully within the bounds of the United States Constitution, prevent any other group from winning. They absolutely could. You think their little state gerrymandering projects have been effective thus far? How do you think a full three branch Republican Party is going to be capable of biasing things in their favor? You don't need a coup. Maybe they'll do one anyway for fun. The Weimar Constitution was in effect during the whole Hitler leadership. Well, bending reality has long been a pastime of Republicans. I have no doubt that as you are marched off to the death camps, they would be explaining how this is perfectly in line with your First Amendment rights. Oh, I can imagine the legal arguments. They would be phenomenal. I have no doubt they would be challenged in blue state courts. What would they do? Freedom to protest and freedom to speech prevents you from government persecution except for certain provisional issues like foul or incendiary speech or calls to violence. Calls to violence aren't protected under the First Amendment, after all. And what is more a call to violence than the defamatory and frankly irresponsible belief and the outward expression of that belief that the Republican Party has achieved its power undemocratically? What is that but an implicit call to insurrection? Off to your death camp. And slavery's legal for people who have been imprisoned, Calls for violence are absolutely constitutional. People have gotten in First Amendment trouble for stuff like that before. And if they own the courts, it really won't matter. They can make up anything they want. And they will. Democrats gerrymander too. By your logic, they should be abolished as well. Oh, no, I love gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is just a natural product of any kind of review group creating the boundaries for their state districts. It's going to happen one way or another. Though I do think some gerrymandering is more malicious than others. The main difference to me, I'm not saying all this because Republicans gerrymander this. I'm saying it because they're openly anti-democratic. Gerrymandering happens in every country that has systems that allow for it. All of them. Attempts to take over the government, however, are quite a bit rarer. That's what's setting me off here. Gerrymandering, this has been a thing for a long time. Of course, I would prefer a system where it's much harder to do, of course, independent review, but humans can't be trusted with drawing districts, embrace AI. I would honestly prefer AI do it or something. I don't know. AI can be biased as well. Maybe just have an independent review do it and then only signing off on it if the state legislator, the voting party agrees to it. Yeah, I don't know. Republican and Democrat petitions. I really don't think the Supreme Court is as far right as you think they are. I mean, they blocked Trump from stealing the election. They're as far right as they need to be. The Republican Party was all neocons 10 years ago. Now, with many of the same people, they're full-on, openly anti-democratic. They are what they need to be. That's what fascists are and what they do. They will play at civility. And by the way, I reject this logic. So we shouldn't be saying all of this because what? There's a chance that maybe some of them will be nice? Don't downplay them. They did this shit with the Nazis. They did this shit back then. Oh, I'm sure that, there are some radicals, but in the past there have been some parts of their party and the conservative groups that have been in government that have been reasonable. No. Trust none of them. Every Republican, as far as I'm concerned, wants you dead by way of being part of an institution that is fighting for the power to make you dead. The first people who were killed by the Nazis were not Jews, they were socialists. Most of the people watching here, of course, are liberals. You're safe for a bit longer, but not all of you. Some of you will die soon under their regime. Hopefully their regime doesn't come about. That would be preferable. Obviously, I would much rather none of this actually takes place. I don't want to fight or be persecuted or be subject to oppression. I want to play video games. I have been playing Death Stranding again. I am trying to get 5 stars at all of the outposts, and it is very satisfying while I listen to podcasts on the side. That is what I want to do. I don't want anything else. I just want to live. But they don't want you to live. They hate your life. They despise your life. They want you to suffer. It's all they want. So don't give them benefit of the doubt. Assume evil from the Republicans always.